and we are going to now make a method called print unsorted array. And so, so we're just going to put it right outside of here and call it public static void. It's void because it's not returning anything. Print unsorted array. Print unsorted array. And then we're going to tell it that it's going to be passed one array and that it should name it unsorted array. I'm going to write our code inside of here. So we're just going to do system.out.println, and it's going to say the elements of the unsorted array are, and then system.out.println nothing. That just makes it go to the next line. So it skips a line, so there's a blank line. Then we're going to have an integer called counter, and we're going to set that equal to 0. I'm going to say 4, and then we're going to have another integer, let's use h, and that's set equal to 0. H is smaller than sorted array dot length and h++, which means it adds 1 to h each time. And so I've gone over this before, so I'm not going to go too in depth with this. This is basically printing 15. We're going to print 15 elements of the array per line. And so the reason this works is we have counter equals 0, and then we have h equals 0. So we're going to print system.out.print. Notice it's not println, it's just print. And then we're going to put in unsorted array subscript h plus, and then we just did that to add a space. And so now we are going to do the counter. So every time it runs that system.out.print, it adds 1 to counter, and then we're going to put a nested if statement. Counter is equal to 15. So if 15 have been printed out, then we're going to say system.out.println nothing, and that just makes it go to the next line. And then we're going to set counter back to 0. And so let's just run this real quick. Oops, I need to put that. Okay, so you see what it did is it said the elements of the unsorted array are, then notice that blank line because we did a system.out.println here, and then we did print here. So the println makes it go to the next line. And so that's essentially it for that. That's printing the unsorted array. That's 500 numbers. 500. And so that's your array filled with random integers. And the reason this works is it says, so h equals 0. And if h is smaller than the array, the unsorted array, is length, because, you know, if it gets higher than the length, there's no, you can't print, if you have an array that has 500 cells, you can't print array subscript 500, because it only goes up to 499 in the subscripts. Or if you have one up to 500, like, array of with 501 cells, you can't print array subscript 501. There's nothing there. There's literally nothing there. You can't print that. It hasn't been initialized, whatever you want to call it. And so what we got to do here is we got to tell it that once it gets equal to the array's length to stop, because if it's equal to the array's length, it's 1 higher than the array's subscript. That's the beauty of this, because if you have an array of 3, then you have array subscript 0, array subscript 1, and array subscript 2. So if it's equal to 3, there's no array subscript 3 because it starts at 0. There's that one-off thing that catches a lot of people, but it actually turns out to be helpful in a case like this. And so anyway, when counter equals 15, now if we change this to counter equals 20, guess what? There would be 20 of these per line. Ta-da! I'm going to change that back to 15. And so anyway, what we now had to do is we have to do the bubble sorting. So we're going to call upon a bubble sort method. So I'm going to say bubble sort, and we're going to pass it array. And now we have to make a method called bubble sort. So let's see, dun, dun, dun. Public static void. Notice it's public static void. It's not returning anything. Bubble sort is not, this bubble sort method here is not returning anything, okay? And we're going to have integer array called array to sort, like that. And we're going to leave the parameters empty. And we're going to write our code in here. And so this method will do the bubble sorting. It'll also call upon another method that we're going to name something like swap. And so with bubble sort, it's kind of, the code gets a little complex, but if you break it down, it makes sense. So we're going to say for, and then we're going to have an integer called pass, and we're going to set it equal to 1. We're going to say that pass has to be smaller than array to sort's length, and that every time we run this, we add 1 to pass, like so. And then in here, we have more code. So this is basically, it's defining an integer called pass. It's saying that if pass is, it's adding 1 to pass every time this code is run, and every time it goes through it and it finds that pass is, well, until it finds that pass is equal to the length of array to sort, then it is running the code that we put inside the brackets. And that code is going to basically say if array to sort's element, say 1, is bigger than array to sort's element plus 1, then we're going to swap those two elements of the array. And so we're going to call upon another method, swap, in order to do that for us. And so for integer pass equals 1, we're going to put inside of here for integer element equals 0, element is smaller than array to sort dot length minus 1. That's very important because in bubble sort, if you've done every single pass, if you say you have an array, let me just put this in a comment. Say you have an array so we have 5, 6, 7, 2, and 4. Okay? So it's going to say, and we're sorting from least to greatest. So it's going to say, is 5 less than 6? Yes. So it's going to move on to, is 6 less than 7? Yes. Okay. Is 7 less than 2? No, it is not. So it's going to swap these. It's going to put 2 here and 7 here. Then is 7 less than 4? No. So it's going to put 4 here and 7 here. Then it's going to start over. Is 5 less than 6? Yes. Is 6 less than 2? No. So we're going to put 2 here. We're going to put 6 here. Is 6 less than 4? No. So we're going to swap those. Now it's almost in order. So is 5 less than 2? No. So we're going to swap those. Is 5 less than 4? No. So we're going to swap those. And now it's in order. That's what bubble swap does. And so once you get to the last, once you sort it all the way through the last element in this array, like 6 and 7, you don't need to sort 7 against itself or 7 against something that's not there. So we say array to sort dot length minus 1 because we don't need to sort anything after the second to last versus the last one, if that makes any sense. I hope it does. If you have questions, leave them in the comments. So array to sort dot length minus 1, and we're going to then say that we're going to add 1 to element each time this code is run. A lot of nesting here. And so we're going to now do our final if statement, our final nested if statement for this certain part. So we're going to say if array to sort subscript element is larger than array to sort subscript element plus 1. I spelled element wrong. I forgot an E. Then it's going to swap them. So if that is true, then we are going to swap array to sort element and element plus 1. And so what we're doing here is we are calling upon a method which we haven't created yet called swap. We're passing it the array, the element in question, and the element in question plus 1. Where are my errors? Oh, okay, and so we're going to, oh, I have a capital bubble sort like that. And so, we're going to make our method called swap right now, which is going to also be public static void. It's going to be, we're going to call it swap. And inside we're going to tell it that it's going to be passed an integer array, array to sort, same array. It's going to have an integer of first and an integer of second. And now we are going to, inside these braces, if I called them brackets earlier, I'm sorry, they are braces. Braces are the curly ones, brackets are the ones like that. So we're going to have our integer inside of this called hold, and we're just going to define it. We're going to say that hold is set equal to array to sort and element, the integer first, because that's going to be passed as element. And then we're going to say array to sort subscript. Why is it not happy about that? To sort cannot be resolved to a variable. Oh, we have capital A here. That's why. Remember, Java is case sensitive. So array to sort first is then set equal to array to sort second. So we're swapping this around, and then we're going to say array to sort second equals hold. So oops, I did not mean to put a capital O there. Kind of looked like a 0, but it was an O. Anyway, so we're going to say we're having an integer called hold. We're kind of using that as temporary storage. We could also call it temp, or whatever. I mean, temp would make sense though. And so we're saying array to sort and then element from up here essentially is what hold is set equal to, and then array to sort first, so array to sort element, is then set equal to array to sort element plus 1, because they have to be swapped, and then the second one is placed to hold. What would be wrong if I said array to sort first equals array to sort second equals array to sort first? Well, first is already overwritten, so then we'd have first and second both equaling the same thing, and we'd lose the data that was in array to sort first. So we have to use another integer, or I mean we could use a double or whatever, but we're using an integer here. Use it as temporary storage to swap the number over. So we call upon swap every time we want to swap two numbers of an array. And so we made our little swap method here. We don't have to return anything. That's the interesting part. There's no returning here. We don't have to, return an array or anything. It's just it passes it these things and it makes the proper modifications to the array that it needs to do. And so we are now going to write one, and then now this should, if this works correctly, bubble sort the array we have here. So then we're going to call on a final method that we're going to call print sorted array, and we're going to of course pass it array, and we're going to write the method for print sorted array. And so public static void, what did I call it? Print sorted array. Print sorted array. And we're going to put inside that pretty much the same stuff as we did inside the print unsorted array. We're going to tell that it's going to be passed a sorted array. Well, an array that it's going to be passed an array, and we want that method to rename that array to sorted array for use within that code, if that makes sense. If you have any questions, again, feel free to leave them in the comments or message me on YouTube or whatever. Public static void, and then we're going to do the same thing we did earlier. We're going to define an integer as counter, and we're going to set that equal to 0. System.out.println the elements of the sorted array are, and then we're going to do system.out.println and have just nothing in there. That makes it go to the next line. And then we're going to say that for integer, and let's just use y here, equals 0. Y is smaller than sorted array dot length, And we're going to add 1 to y every time this code is run. We don't need that semicolon there. And the code inside will be run every time. We're going to have another nested in here to use the counter integer in order to move to the next line. You'll see that in just a minute, and you already saw it earlier, so it's not a surprise or anything. Systemout.println, and it's going to print out the sorted array subscript y, because that's what it is currently on. If it's on y equals 0, then it's printing out sorted array subscript 0. If y is then equal to 1, it's printing out sorted array subscript 1. It's a really slick way to do this. And then we're going to add to that just a space there, so that we have a space between every number in the sorted array, every element of the sorted array when it's printed out. And so now we're going to put in, we're going to tell it to, semicolon, we're going to tell it that it needs to add 1 to counter each time that's run. And then we're going to say that if counter equals, if counter equals, what did we use earlier, 15 I think? So if counter is equal to 15, then, I think I screwed up here. I think I added 1 too many of these braces. There we go, that's right, okay. So if counter is equal to 15, then we're going to do system.out.println. We're going to leave this empty, so it's just going to the next line, and then we're going to set counter equal to 0 again. So we can start the process over with counting up to 15, so it can do another println going to the next line thing. And so let's run it. So the elements of the unsorted, or I think we did something wrong here. Oh, it's not supposed to be println, it's supposed to be print. There we go. Okay, so we're going to run this. It's going to tell you the elements of the unsorted array are, and just has this random kind of number gibberish. And then the elements, we should, just for aesthetic purposes, you can still read it there, but if we wanted to, we could here we could do a system.out.println and then another system.out.println, and you'll see what that does in just a minute. So now it has this nice and neat empty line between the unsorted and the sorted array. So then it says the elements of the sorted array are, and look, they're all in numerical order. There is not one out of order in here because we ran the bubble sort method on it. And so that is pretty much it for today's tutorial. Sorry it got so long. It's like 22 minutes right now. But I will be posting this later today, as well as I will be posting Java tutorial 12 and 13 hopefully today or tomorrow. Those will be focusing on Java applet graphics. One's going to be showing you how to draw random lines constrained in a certain space, and one's going to be showing you how to draw random lines and circles constrained within quadrants. I kind of do a workaround. Instead of setting the, here I'll talk about this in that tutorial, but instead of setting the origin in the middle like most people like to do and working from there, I've come from HTML. I know some HTML. I use div tags, and so it makes a lot more sense to work from the upper left corner for me, and so that's the way I'm going to be teaching it. Of course, I will I won't even mention how to set the origin equal to 0. That just gets confusing. I'm going to use it this way. You can also, I will let it be known that you can set the origin to 0, the origin to the middle of the applet, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'll show you the way that I like to do it in that tutorial. So until next time, this is the Best Mac Tutorials, and I will see you later.